All right, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depends on where you are in our nation. I am Deacon Modesto Cordero, and I wanted to welcome you this morning or this afternoon on behalf of the Damien and Marian Catholic Conference to our webinar in the theme of evangelization through the corporal works of mercy. And today's topic will be Queen Kapiolani and Saint Damien. I am the president of the Damien and Marian Catholic Conference Board. For many of you in Hawaii, you knew me for many years as the director of the Office of Worship for the Diocese of Honolulu. I recently had moved to California, and I am now working on the Diocese of Orange as also the director of the Diocese of the Office of Liturgy here at Orange. So if you come to California and you are around Christ Cathedral, our beautiful former Crystal Cathedral, please come and visit me. I've been here around for 2 months already. I already settled and I'm having a wonderful time. I do miss my people in Hawaii. I had to say that, but I am also having a great time here in California. So welcome on behalf of our Damien Marian Catholic Conference. Today's presenter is Miss Colette Higgins. Miss Colette Higgins, she's a Dean of Academic Affairs at Windward Community College in Hawaii, in the island of Oahu. She has been researching and presenting lectures on the life and legacy of Queen Kapiolani since 2002, emphasizing the Queen's visits to Kalaupapa in 1884 and her journey to London in 1887. Her sabbatical research in 2016 included retracing Queen Kapiolani's 1887 journey to London. Now, Colette was born and raised in Hawaii. She grew up mostly in Kaimuki and now lives in Kaneohe. She's a graduate of St. Patrick's School. She graduated in 1980 and in Kaimuki High School in 1984. In 1988, she received an associate degree in liberal arts from Kapiolani Community College, and then she transferred to UH Manoa, where she earned a bachelor's degree in history and anthropology in 1990. Then she proceeded to get a master's degree in history in 1992. Now, while attending UH Manoa, she was inducted into the Phi Beta Kappa Society, and she was a recipient of an East-West Center grant. Colette was a professor of history at Kapiolani Community College, where she taught Hawaiian history for nearly 20 years, and for which she received the Francis David Award for Excellence in Undergraduate Teaching, and also the UH Board of Regents Excellence in Teaching Awards. Colette has served in multiple boards of directors like the Pacific History Parks, the Waikalua Local Fish Pond Preservation Society, and the Hawaii Council for the Humanities. And she has also served since 2016 as a board member for the National Pacific American Leadership Institute, and she is a member of the San Antonio of Padua School in Kailua. So I wanted to welcome this morning our speaker, our presenter. She is not new to us. She has spoke before in our Damien Marian Catholic conferences in Honolulu, and we are so happy to have her this month and also in our next October webinar. So with no more further ado, I wanted to present Colette. But as Colette is coming up to the screen, we would like to begin with a prayer this morning. And as many of you know, this weekend we are celebrating the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary, a big solemnity for us in our Catholic faith. And I would like to bring to the attention of our prayer this morning this big celebration. So let us begin in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. O God, who looking on the lowliness of the Blessed Virgin Mary, raised her to this grace, that your only begotten Son was born of her according to the flesh, and that she was crowned this day with surpassing glory. Grant through her prayers that, saved by the mystery of your redemption, we may merit to be exalted by you on high. Through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. So I will be stopping now my presentation, and Colette will start sharing hers. So Colette, is all yours.
Good morning, all, and welcome. Can you hear me okay? Yes, everybody can hear me? Yes, okay, good. Let's see, so I am going to share my PowerPoint with you. And okay, all right, so welcome. I get to tell you some stories today about Queen Kapiolani and Saint Damien. So my research has been on Queen Kapiolani, and as you heard in my introduction, I used to teach Hawaiian history for about 20 years over at Kapiolani Community College. So that's what got me interested in learning more about the Queen. And so they have asked me, the Damien Marianne Catholic Conference, the folks have asked me to actually put this in terms of our faith and the corporal works of mercy. And so I am Catholic and I've been raised in the Catholic Church, but I had to go look up the corporal works of mercy, the 7 of them. So I found them and I listed them there. And of those 7, as you look at them there, feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, clothe the naked, shelter the homeless, visit the sick, visit the imprisoned, and bury the dead. I would say that Kapiolani did the first 6. Yeah, and not the 7th. I know Father Damien did a lot of burying the dead, but for her, it's 1 through 6. So as I'm going through my stories, I'm going to also try to highlight which work of mercy that I think she's doing there. So the picture you see is what I call her traveling clothes, right? This is Victorian era, the 1880s. And that's also her signature that I found in one of the letters, which we'll talk about. Let's see, I have to advance my slides here. Okay, so just so you can put Father Damien and Queen Kapiolani into historical context, here's some important events in their lives. So we're talking about the 1800s or the 19th century. And just so you know, Kapiolani was born in Hilo, and she is a bit older than Father Damien. So he was born in Tremelo in Belgium. And then when you take a look at the important dates in their life, so she married Kalakaua, who wasn't king yet. She married Kalakaua in 1863. And she and Kalakaua are Anglicans, right? So it was Bishop Staley from the Anglican Church who started the Anglican Church here in Hawaii in 1862, and they were married in 1863. And we know that Father Damien was actually ordained here in Honolulu at the Cathedral of Our Lady of Peace, and that was in 64. So you can see they're contemporaries, right? They will interact with each other. They get, they work together, but their lives are sort of as interesting parallels. She became queen when Kalakaua was elected as king in 74. And of course, the important date for Father Damien was when he actually arrived in Kalaupapa. He actually served in Hawaii for about 9 years, mostly on the Big Island of Hawaii, but he wasn't sent to Kalaupapa until 73. Now, what I want to focus on today is going to be her visit to Kalaupapa, what she did in preceding the visit, what she did when she was there in Kalaupapa, and what she did afterwards. So that visit in 1884 to Kalaupapa is very important. And I'd like to share those stories, and I've got some primary source documents and things that I think you'll find interesting. And for him, that time period when she visited, he actually, I don't think he was suffering from the symptoms of leprosy yet, because he wouldn't be diagnosed until December of 84, but it's very close. It's that same year, right? That she visits and he would be diagnosed with leprosy. And then she actually lives longer than he does. So he passes away on April 15th, 89, and she dies in June of 1899. And so to focus us, I was looking for a scripture passage, and I like this one because I think it embodies both Kapiolani and Father Damien. And it says, do nothing out of selfishness or out of vainglory. Rather, humbly regard others as more important than yourselves, each looking out not for his own interest, but also everyone for those of others. And I think that's true of Queen Kapiolani. People don't really expect that out of a queen oftentimes, but I really do think she's like very, very high ranking, but very, very humble and always looking out for the least fortunate. And same thing with Father Damien. Sometimes he's accused of being sort of forward and stubborn or rude or whatnot, but he's really looking out for the people in Kalaupapa, and he's doing whatever he must to really help them. So he's not doing it for his own vainglory. He's doing it for them. Before I go any further, though, I do want to talk about the words we use in Hawaii for the disease of leprosy. So in Hawaii, if you were to talk about, let's say if you take the word leprosy and you just Hawaiianize it, right? It would be lapela or lapera with the R. The L and R's are interchangeable in early written Hawaiian. And you can see ma'i is our word that we have for sickness or illness. So ma'i lapela is leprosy if you're just going to Hawaiianize the English. We think that it was brought over by the Chinese. So then pake is Hawaiian for Chinese. So it's the Chinese sickness. I'm going to tell you a story about an ali'i who had the disease, or a chief who had the disease. And then once the government, the Kingdom of Hawaii, started isolating people in Kalaupapa, then it began to be known as the ma'i ho'oka'awale, which is a separation sickness. So that doesn't happen until 66 when they sent the first people there, right? So they have the act that was passed, and then they separate the people. So we have different words that we're using for leprosy in the Hawaiian language. And I want to point out something very interesting. As I was doing my research, I discovered that the Queen and whoever wrote the final report or edited the final report of her visit, they didn't use the word leper. And we don't like to use that word because you're defining a person by the disease, and I don't want to do that. But what I found interesting was when you look at the letter, so Kapiolani's letter to Father Damien in 1884, she does not use the word leper, because if you look at the actual letter, and it's just basically, she is in this particular letter, she says, I am awaiting your approval of the allotment of clothes for the kapo'e ma'i, and I've circled where it shows you she's not saying leper, because that would be lepela, but she's saying kapo'e ma'i. So po'e ma'i, that's just the sick people, right? It's the patients. The giving of the allotment of clothes for the po'ema'i at Kaka'ako is being withheld until I hear from you. I pray to Almighty God to help us in this great work. I am still using your book with best wishes to you and your beloved ma'i. I am very sincerely yours. So I find that fascinating, because that letter, so that's where I got this kapo'ema'i. So for her, they are not lepers, they're patients. They're people first, because the po is people and ma'i is sickness, the sick people, the patients. And then when the report was made about her visit in 1884 and it would be published, somebody went through, and I went and I looked at the draft at the state archives, and they actually crossed out the word lepers and replaced it with patients. And then what I realized, what they did, there's the actual document, the larger document where you can see they crossed it out. And then if you look at what appears from that draft, so somebody crosses it out in 84 when the draft is being prepared. When it finally gets printed, you can see that it's not the word lepers, it's patients. I find this fascinating because this is 1884, 86, and I know that it's later on in Kalaupapa that a lot of the patients would say, please don't use the word leper, it's derogatory, we shouldn't be defined by our disease. And so this movement since 1980s or so of getting people to not use that word, to use leprosy, people with Hansen's disease. But I find it fascinating that back in 1884, 86, we have somebody who was sensitive enough, I don't know who it was, that crossed it out and put the word patients instead. So I just wanted to kind of lay that groundwork so you know who we're, what time period and the words we're using. So before I go any further, I need to give you a brief Hawaiian history lesson, I think, so we can put Kapiolani as well as Father Damien, St. Damien, into context, historical context in Hawaii. So we had the Kingdom of Hawaii here in the 19th century from 1810 to 1893. And usually when I tell people, there's only 8 ruling monarchs in the history of our kingdom, and the first 5 are easy to remember because they are Kamehameha 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Kamehameha the first, of course, unified the islands, and then Kamehameha the second and third are his his sons, and then Kamehameha the fourth is his grandson, and then Kamehameha the fifth is his grandson as well. So let me back up just a little bit and just tell you a little bit about each of these monarchs to put them in context. So you know that Kamehameha the Great unified the island. So the R next to the dates there, that's the years that he reigned, right? So he unifies the islands in 1810. He dies, and then his son, Kamehameha II, Liholiho, becomes king, and he only rules for 5 years. But very importantly, he is the one who got rid of the old Hawaiian religion, or the kapu system, or the aikapu. So he's the one that does away with it. He sits down and eats with his mothers, and so by doing that, he's basically breaking the eating kapu, or the eating restrictions. And now we have no ancient Hawaiian religion until missionaries come in and introduce Christianity. So there's a bit of a gap after that. He actually dies in London. He's trying to see King George in London. He dies there of the measles in 1824. And so Kamehameha the Great's other son, Kauikeaole, Kamehameha III, becomes king in 1824 when the bodies of his brother and his wife comes back to Hawaii. So notice that Kauikeaole, Kamehameha III, rules for the longest. It's 30 years that he reigns. He comes to the throne as a boy. He's about 10 years old when he comes to the throne. So many changes in Hawaiian history happened during his reign. So it's during his reign that we are acknowledged as a Christian nation. It's during his reign that we see constitutional monarchy in 1840. It's during his reign that we see the private ownership of land in 1848 with the Great Mahele. Lots of changes under Kauikeaole. Somebody really needs to do more research on that ruler. And then we have the sons. So those were the sons, 2 and 3. And then Kamehameha the fourth is a grandson of Kamehameha the Great. And so his name is Alexander Liholiho, and he's famous for having, he's married to Queen Emma. And we'll talk a little bit more about him because there's some stories that I want to share. So Alexander Liholiho married to Queen Emma. The two of them, they're noted for bringing the Anglican Church to Hawaii and also opening up Queen's Hospital in 1860, I believe. And then we have Lata Kapua'iwa. So that's Kamehameha the Fourth's older brother. That's a story for another day, but the older brother becomes king after. And so he becomes king in 63. And he rules until his death in 72. He's a bachelor king. He wants to throw Hawaii back to sort of the old ways. And he makes some changes to the constitution and such, but he doesn't have an heir to the throne. He had asked like Bernice Pauahi Bishop, the princess, and she said no. And so we needed to have an election based on the constitution that he wrote. And so the first elected king is not a Kamehameha. He's related, but not a direct line. And so William Lunalilo becomes king, but he only rules for 1 year because he has tuberculosis. So he dies. And so we need to have a second election based on the Constitution. We have to have a second election. And the person who was elected was David Kalakaua. And David Kalakaua rules for 17 years, if I did the math right, 17 years. And so he is elected as king, and he decides we're not going to do elections anymore. So I'm going to designate an heir to the throne instead. And so he designates his sister, Liliuokalani, as heir to the throne. Actually, he designated his younger brother, William Pitleleohoku, but he dies. And so at that point, then he designates his sister. So when Kalakaua dies in San Francisco in 1891, and his body is brought back, it's Liliuokalani who is sworn in as the next ruler because she realizes her brother has died, and then she has to get sworn in as the next monarch. So she only rules for 2 years because she's overthrown by a small group of American businessmen. So to put it into context, you've got King David Kalakaua as the seventh monarch of, or the seventh and also seventh king of our monarchy, our kingdom in Hawaii, and his wife is Queen Kapiolani. So I think sometimes people get those two mixed up, Kapiolani and Liliuokalani. I think it's because their names end with Lani, and maybe they both were queens and they both lived at Iolani Palace at different points in time. And so people who don't know Hawaiian history, Hawaiian language, and whatnot, they get them mixed up. But please, please do not get the two women mixed up. Queen Kapiolani is the wife of David Kalakaua, and Liliuokalani is the sister. And you don't get your wife and your sister mixed up, right? They're two different people. And back in the old days, however, in Kamehameha the first and the second's time, even the third, the wife and the sister could be the same person. But that's a different story for another day. You'd have to take Hawaiian history class with me to learn more about how that worked. Anyway, Queen Kapiolani, she is a couple years older than her husband, Kalakaua, and those are beautiful pictures of them. So when I started doing my research about Queen Kapiolani, I found this book. It's the one book, the only book written about Queen Kapiolani. It's only about 60 pages, and it was published in 1985. And in that book, it talks about two missions that was very close to her heart: the perpetuation of the Hawaiian race. Worried that the race was dying out, she dreamed of one day founding a hospital for underprivileged Hawaiian mothers where they could safely have their babies. And she was worried about the plight of the lepers. So I'm just quoting here. I don't like to use the word. I'm just quoting. But in 1985, they used it in their book. Kapiolani personally continued to raise money through various charity events to improve conditions of those unfortunate victims in both Honolulu and Molokai. So let me tell you a couple of stories and why she is interested in these two charities that are close to her heart. Oftentimes when it comes to charitable work, I think we make choices based on our own experiences sometimes. And I think that's true of Queen Kapiolani. So back when she was married to her first husband, Bennett Namakeha, when she was married to her first husband, who was, by the way, much older than her. So when we take a look at this picture, Kapiolani is about 18 years old and Namakeha is 53 when they got married. So that's 35 years her senior, Namakeha is. But that's not unusual in Hawaiian culture, especially among the upper class, the ali'i, the chiefs, because even in Kamehameha the Great, his sacred wife was his niece, right? And that's the mother of the next two Kamehamehas, Kamehameha rulers, right? So that's not unusual for that to have a big age difference among the upper class. So the story I want to tell you is about when she was married to her first husband, Bennett Namakeha. She actually did get pregnant and she had a stillborn child. And because of the stillborn child, she actually had milk in her breast, right? And so she is asked by Queen Emma to become the wet nurse of her son, little Prince Albert, because around the same time that Kapiolani is giving birth to her stillborn child, Queen Emma actually gives birth to little Prince Albert. And so Queen Emma asked Kapiolani if she would serve as the wet nurse for little Prince Albert because she had milk in her breast, right? So she does. And there's actually a connection between these two families. So Namakeha is actually the biological uncle of Queen Emma. So there's relationships here. And so actually Kapiolani does serve as the wet nurse. She takes little Prince Albert to her breast after just having lost her own child, and she actually nurses him. Now, the sad part is that little Prince Albert dies when he's about 4 years old. He's just a little boy. And so she loses her own child, you know, as stillborn, and then now she loses little Prince Albert. So imagine the grief of that. And so now you got a little bit of background as to why she might open the Kapiolani maternity home. So there's a picture of the maternity home that she opened from her sister. Her sister lived in that home near Beretania and Makiki Street, which would be where, if you know where the old food line on Beretania was, that's where it would have been located. And so you've got that particular home, and that really is her legacy. But now you know that there's an actual personal story associated with that. She knew the grief of losing a baby and also a little child. So we know that Kapiolani Maternity Home is the predecessor of our Kapiolani Medical Center for Women and Children today, right? And Queen Emma actually is very concerned about the health of her people, right? She's the one with Kamehameha IV who actually opened up Queen's Hospital in 1860 because they were concerned about subjects dying from disease. And the story goes that what Queen Emma and Kamehameha IV did is those two went around home to home, actually asking people to donate, and so they could raise the money to open the hospital. So remember that story, because I have a slightly different story to tell about another home that was opened by Queen Kapiolani. So we have these connections in the families, and I just wanted to share that story with you. If you go into the hospital today, they have this picture in their lobby area of that maternity home and what it would have looked like. And so I think that's kind of, that's her legacy. If you really think about it, she really intended for this maternity home to open up so that the babies would live. That's what she wanted. So that was her first charity, right? The perpetuation of the Hawaiian race. And to help with that, she opened up the hospital. But the other mission that was close to her heart was to help the people with leprosy. And so I think it's because when I looked at that same book, Yardley and Rogers, they write about this fact. They said that she, Kapiolani, became more compassionate when a close relative became a victim of this dread disease. And so she's talking about leprosy. So Bennett Namakeha, her first husband, his brother had leprosy, right? So in a book published in 1916 by Dr. Moritz, it's called The Path of the Destroyer, A History of Leprosy in the Hawaiian Islands and 30 years research into the means of which it has been spread. In that book, Dr. Moritz is quoted to say, George Na'ea, husband of Queen Emma's mother, was a leper in the year 1838. He died in 1854. Again, I don't like to use the L word, but I'm quoting Moritz in 1916 when he writes this book. What I'm fascinated by is how he phrased that. George Na'ea, husband of Queen Emma's mother. Husband of Queen Emma's mother. Husband of Queen Emma's mother. Is that Queen Emma's father? Yes. George Na'ea is the biological father of Queen Emma. We know that she was adopted by Dr. Rook, but her biological father is George Na'ea. This is why Bennett Namakeha is her biological uncle, Queen Emma's biological uncle. So, notice how it seems like a distancing that's happening here. I don't know why he's doing it this way. Why didn't he just say Queen Emma's father? But instead he said, husband of Queen Emma's mother. It's very strange to me how it's phrased, but that's how he phrased it. So Queen Emma's father died from leprosy. Now take a look at the dates. Yeah, 1854. Now, you know that she was married to him to Bennett Namakeha in the 1850s. So, 1854 is prior to the government ordering those with leprosy to go to Kalaupapa, right? So that act is passed in 1865. The first group is sent in 1866. So 1854, at this time, if people had leprosy, you were cared for at home by your relatives. So she would have seen the disease up close and personal because this is her brother-in-law. And so this is I think the close relative that Yardley and Rogers is speaking of. And again, also very cryptic in what they write, right? They're not naming the person, but I think this is the person they're talking about. So she would have seen the disease up close and personal. So that slide I showed you earlier, right? The royal sickness, they're talking about George Na'ea. George Na'ea and his household, and they became sick with leprosy. So they called it the royal sickness, or the ma'i ali'i. And then after the law was passed in 65, then we start calling it the separation sickness, because prior to, you would have been cared for by your family members at home. So this is why I think the Hawaiians in general were not afraid of leprosy. And the queen herself too, she was not afraid of it. They would have seen this disease up close and personal, and they would have been helping their own relatives and care for them when they are sick. So I want to tell you some stories, and a story about how she visited Kalaupapa. So Queen Kapiolani visited Molokai. So this picture is a picture of the Makanalua Peninsula. That's what it's called, but more popularly we talk about it as Kalaupapa. And if you look at what I've labeled there on the right there, that's the Kalaupapa, the town, and on the left is Kalawao. And you can see that it's very isolated, right? It's surrounded by ocean, and then you have the very, very steep pali, or the cliffs, right? And so my first hint here as to our corporal works of mercy is here because she visits Kalaupapa. So she's visiting the sick people there, the kapo'ema'i, the patients, the sick people, right? But I would also argue that she's visiting those who the government in Hawaii treated as if they were criminals or imprisoned them, right? They were criminal. They used words as if they were criminals. They were victims of a disease, but the way the government talked about it, those thought to have the disease would be arrested by the bounty hunter and then exiled to Makanalua for a life sentence. To those who had leprosy, they were adjudged civilly dead, and so that's why they could remarry, right? So the government acknowledged that they were civilly dead. If they were fortunate and the disease became inactive, they would be paroled to visit family or friends, right? So I would argue that when she's actually visiting the sick, she's also visiting people who have been banished or exiled, or in the way the government's using the language, as if they're treating them as if they are prisoners, but they are sick and they're being treated that way. So she visits in 2 days, in July 21 and 22, 1884. So about that trip. So prior to going on this trip, and the reason she goes on this trip is really because people have been asking her for help. So I really do think that Queen Kapiolani is an excellent example of servant leadership. Just by the way she raises money for the people, and that she's going to help the people with leprosy. So she's well known as a great fundraiser, her and her women associated with her charitable organization. So she's a great fundraiser, not just for the people with leprosy, but also for the hospital. She goes and she makes this visit. She actually visits every home. She corresponds, with Father Damien from July to October, and I'll talk more about that. And then she opens up a home for the girls whose parents have leprosy. So I really think just by telling you the story, I hope it illustrates for you a servant leadership model, right? A very high-ranking woman here who's a queen who actually is very, very humble, in my opinion, just by her actions and what she does and her personality, who she is. And then she's always thinking of the people who are less fortunate or least fortunate. How can I help them? And in her day and age, that was the people with leprosy. So what we have are these reports. And so in Kapiolani's report, the report that she makes about the visit that they would make to Kalaupapa, Kapiolani goes with them so she can write the report. And so in her report, she said, I have been made familiar with your letters to me and petitions to the legislature. So Kapiolani is quoting what Queen Kapiolani said to the people. When she gets up there and she speaks to them, I've heard from your letters and from your petitions to the legislature that you are suffering. So I'm going to come here and investigate. And so what I found this particular petition inside the collection, the Kalani Aniole collection at the Hawaii State Archives. And funny thing about the Kalani Aniole collection, they have these documents related to the 1880s, even though it's filed away in this collection that's dated to the 1860s. And the reason for that is because there's a notebook that's in the State Archives, the Hawaii State Archives. And in the first half of the notebook, it's an organization that Queen Kapiolani was the treasurer for. It was a Honolulu organization to help people with problems. It was called Ahahui Kokua Pilikia o Honolulu, which is basically the Honolulu organization to help people with problems. And so she was a treasurer for that. And she kept track of it in her notebook in the 1860s. And then there's nothing in the notebook for a number of pages. And then you see these petitions and the list of names and the people for the Kalaupapa story that's from the 1880s. So what I think happened here was Queen Kapiolani thought, I'm going to recycle a notebook. And so the notebook was 20 years old, but, open up the notebook. Let's use it to start this project that I have that she's going to do with Father Damien. Okay, so she has that notebook. It was a great find for me. Just a little note in one of the State Archives collection notes said that there was a book. And so I went, asking them, can you please bring the book out so I can see it? I was quite amazed by that book. So the story goes that she decided, because they're writing her these letters and they're asking for help, she decided to organize her ladies, the 30 ladies. They met with the Queen on June 3rd. So the group is called Ho'oulu Ame Ho'ola Lahui. And so that is basically, Ho'oulu means to cause to grow. Ho'ola is the life, and Lahui is the nation. And so it's caused to grow and to give life to the nation. That was the society. And so this is the same charitable organization that she led that would also open the hospital, right? And so these 30 ladies that are part of her society, they organize together, and she tells them of the sad conditions of the poor lepers who were in need of many things not provided by law, and appeal to the sympathy and aid of those present. The ladies unanimously expressed themselves as willing and anxious to do anything in their power to help the Queen in her kind-hearted endeavor, and immediately set about discussing ways and means. And so notice what it says, the date there. She's meeting with them on June 3rd, 1884. Okay, by July 1st, 1884, it's done. The party is done. It's POW. And they're mentioning it in the newspaper. So it happened on June 26th. So that alone, to me, is amazing. She organized this very quickly, right? So 1884, June 3rd, she's meeting with them. What are we going to do? How are we going to help them, right? And then they had the party, the garden party on the 26th of June, and they're already talking about it in the newspaper on July 1st. So the palace was thrown open for public inspection. The band played throughout the afternoon and evening, and you can see then all the money, the take, of what they were able to get. So of course, the fancy table drew the most money, it looks like. Also the receipts at the gate. And by the way, Iolani Palace was brand new at that point in time. So when you look at the pictures of Iolani Palace, we think of it as this old structure today, but it had only been open for like 2 years at that point in time. And if you were an ordinary Kanaka, an ordinary Hawaiian person, you would not have gone into Iolani Palace. So this was your opportunity to actually go check it out, to go in, take a tour. So they actually opened it up and people got to see. So they made a lot of money. If you look at the amount that they grossed, it's over $2,000. You put that into 2021 monies, and that's about over $60,000. That's quite a lot of money that she raised. So that garden party was quite a success. The idea was to actually raise enough money so that they could take what goods were needed to the people in Kalaupapa, right? They were asking for certain things and they needed some help. So she had her fundraising fundraising party. She raised the money, and then she's going to make a visit. So in terms of this visit, I just want to pull back a little bit and tell you where I got the information. Two sources. Basically, Princess Liliuokalani writes the report. So at this point, Liliuokalani is the heir apparent. She is the princess. She is not queen, right? So she is traveling along with Queen Kapiolani to Kalaupapa, and her responsibility is to write the report. It's a lovely report. You can actually go and read the draft that's in the Hawaii State Archives. The writing, however, is not hers, because that is not Liliuokalani's handwriting. Hers is a lot messier than that. I suspect that that's a secretary that's writing it. On the right-hand side, there was Ambrose Hutchison's manuscript. Now, Ambrose Hutchison had served as superintendent, resident superintendent in Kalaupapa for 14 years, from 1884 to 1897. He was diagnosed with leprosy, and he lived in Kalaupapa. He doesn't die until 1832, I believe. And so just the year before he dies, he is writing his memoirs, or his memories. And so he writes about this visit of Kapiolani to Kalaupapa. And this is important because he's the only person that witnessed her visiting every home. He was the one that escorted her into those homes. So let's take a look then at the beginning of this report that Liliuokalani writes about this visit. Her Majesty, His Majesty the King, Sire, I have the honor to submit the particulars of Her Majesty's visit to the leper asylum on Molokai, and in obedience to Your Majesty's wishes, I have accompanied her thither to the place there. The steamer Waimanalo, so the name of the ship that was going to take them there is called Waimanalo, having been placed at the disposal of Her Majesty by Honorable J.A. Cummings, the party embarked early on Saturday the 19th, leaving Honolulu at 3 a.m., and arriving at Waimanalo at 8 a.m. that morning. So just look at that, 3 a.m. I have no idea why they left at 3 a.m. Speculations would be, were they going when it was the right tide? The waters were better. Were they going because they were trying to avoid any kind of traffic in Honolulu, at the Honolulu Harbor at that time? I have no idea why they left at 3 a.m. But I do know that they arrived in Waimanalo at 8 a.m. that morning. So those of you who are not from Hawaii, just a quick little geography, right? When you take a look at this map, you can see that it's divided up by the 5 actually counties in Hawaii, because Kalawao is considered its own county. So we really have 4, the big island of Hawaii, then Maui, Molokai, Lanai, and Kaho'olawe is one county except for Kalawao. And then you have Oahu, and then you have Kauai, and you have 4 counties, right? And so you see where Waimanalo is on the eastern part of Oahu. So she leaves Honolulu Harbor, and Honolulu, she goes to Waimanalo, and then in Waimanalo, she stays overnight there at the Cummings estate. And then from there, on the next morning, right, they're going to leave to Kalawao. And so Kalawao, that's labeled there, that little hump there, that is Kalaupapa. When we're talking about Kalaupapa, Father Damien and the people and where they were exiled, it's that little leaf, Kalaupapa means flat leaf. And so it's that little hump there that you can see there. So they're going to make that trip from Waimanalo to Kalawao. So they stayed overnight at the Cummings estate because so there's a picture of the pier and his estate. He had a large sugar plantation out there, and he entertained a lot of different royals. So the Cummings estate was known for that. Every single royal person in Ali'i had been entertained at luau's at the Cummings estate. So she stays overnight there on 1920. And then the next morning they set off to actually visit Kalaupapa. And it says here that, so the weather proving favorable on Monday morning. So this is why, it's the weather, why they would, maybe wait and stay in Waimanalo. We left that place for Kalaupapa and reached our destination at 4 p.m. So they're leaving in the morning in Waimanalo, and then they're ending up in Kalaupapa at 4 p.m. So the party consisted of Her Majesty the Queen, J.A. Cummings, his wife. So his wife, the Lady Cummings, would be in attendance to the Queen. So she's going to be the lady's maid. And then we have Dr. Arning. So Dr. Arning was in Hawaii only from 83 to 86. He was hired by the government to try to find a cure for leprosy. So he had just arrived not too long ago. He had never been to Kalaupapa. This was his first trip there. And so he's going on this trip. And then we have the comptroller, Wilson, and then we have from the household, and then they're received by Ambrose Hutchison, and who is assistant superintendent, and Father Damien and Father Albert also there. right? So that's the people who are greeting them. And then, of course, a large number of the patients were also assembled there. So Father Damien does greet our queen and the royal party. So Hutchison provides us this really great sort of document of what happened when the queen visits. So my quotes are from him. So if it seems a little awkward the way he phrases it, it's Hutchison's words. So when she addressed her people, she said, "For I've heard told of so much misery and suffering among you, my dear people, segregated from all you hold dear. I intend to personally inspect your homes, to individually meet you and to talk to you, and to see with my own eyes the conditions you are in, that I can bear witness to tell the king of your needs." And she does. She listens to them. Yeah, she says she's going to visit every home. She does do that, actually. She visits every home of every patient to find out what their needs were. So as she listened to them, so after she spoke, then they get up and they start telling all of their needs and the complaints that would make it into the report, right? These are the things we need. We have insufficient food rations, right? So the pa'iai. So the pa'iai for the Hawaiians, just so you know, when it comes to the Hawaiians, we've got the taro plant, the picture on the left, that's our taro plant, or kalo, we called it. And then you take that out, and the root from that taro plant, you actually steam it, and then you peel it all off, and then you pound it into that really a big old pound of a thing of mush, pounded taro root. And then what you do is you wrap that in tea leaf, right? And that's how you transport it, right? You transport the pa'iai. And then when it gets to the destination, then they mix it with water to make poi. And that's poi at the bottom picture there. So when they say that we need our pa'iai, that's what they're talking about. It's this transport. It's wrapped in tea leaf. It's this transported, pounded, already cooked and pounded taro. That is how you transport it. And that's for their poi. They want more pa'iai. We don't, it's landed at Waikolu, which is 5 miles away from Kalaupapa. And then we have to mix it ourselves. We're patients, we're sick. We can't always do this, right? To make the poi. So and then the government was saying, oh, but you can have rice. And then the Hawaiians, the complaint often in the letters that would follow is like, we don't want rice. We are Hawaiians. Poi is what we need, not rice. Yeah. And so we need our pa'iai. We need our poi. So there's a number of people asking for more pa'iai and easier transport of that. And then insufficient clothing. So the allowance they were given for their clothing wasn't enough to keep them warm. Some died of the cold in the winter as a result of that. That's what the patients are saying as they're getting up and giving her they're speaking to her about what's going on. And then they said we have a great need for wholesome water to drink, so fresh drinking water to prepare the food. And they have to travel 3 miles and pack it themselves, right? So they're saying we need wholesome water, and we can't always go there. Again, the government had sent people there in '66, and the idea was for them to be self-sufficient, to grow their own taro, to pound their own poi, to be self-sufficient. But you think about it, these people are sent there because they're sick. They've been diagnosed with leprosy, and it gets progressively worse, and it affects their hands. It affects their senses. How can they pound their poi and go these distances for water and food, right? And then they also said at this point in time, there's no, they needed better hospitals. So there was a hospital, but they don't have nurses. They know about the Sisters of Mercy, or that's what they're talking about in their speeches. They know about the Sisters of St. Francis who have already come. And they're at Kaka'ako in Honolulu at the Kaka'ako Branch Hospital. So they know about them. And they said, we need nurses like that here in Kalaupapa. So send those sisters to us. And so those are the things they're asking for. So I put in bold: food, clothing, water, nurses. What were the corporal works of mercy? Give food to the hungry, clothe the naked, give water to those who are thirsty, right? And to visit the sick, right? Or in this case, to care for them appropriately. Yeah. So the last speaker was the superintendent. So it's Hutchinson talking about himself. Yeah, he always talks in the third person or he writes this way. So the last speaker was a superintendent. While he was still speaking, a girl child of about 2 years old had escaped from its mother in the crowd and found her way to the front where the speaker stood, poked her head around the ankles of the speaker's legs, piped its childish voice, "Papa, Papa." The speaker stooped down and lifted the child up, who put her tiny arms around the speaker's neck. And an act of providence through an innocent child inspired the speaker's mind with an idea unthought of until that very moment, which became a realization 17 months thereafter. turned the child about to face the queen. Here is a non-leper child, one of many. Must she and the other children like her be left to their fate to become victims of the dread scourge? I ask your majesty for a home established for this child and others like her, where they may be removed, cared, and educated with hope of their not becoming victims of the scourge. So this is a picture, I believe, of the girl the girl that he was holding, and it's Annie, little Annie. And so she was about 3 or 4, I'm thinking, I'm not sure, but a little child, yeah. And so this, he says, is inspired. It comes to his mind. So Hutchison, is thinking, these children are being born here, and they don't have leprosy when they're born. But if they stay here long enough, they are going to be exposed to it and likely get the disease. So please take them away. Think about what they're asking here, right? Their own children, please take them away so they don't get the leprosy. Just the sacrifice of the people, that just amazes me when I stop and think about that they're asking for this. Please take my child away. They're thinking of the child, not themselves, right? So the Queen Kapiolani arose from her seat, came forward and down the steps, stood on the last step, thrust her arms out, asked the child to be given to her, which was done. She took hold and kissed the child and hugged it to her breast, and in a low voice to the speaker said, "A comely child." Which is in Hawaii, you know, when you pick up the little babies and you just kind of, we do this a lot. It's like, oh, cute, the baby, right? That's what we do in Hawaii. What a comely child, a beautiful child. A woman sitting in the rear among the crowd was pointed out to the Queen. The Queen, in restoring the child to its mother, said to her, "Take good care of the child. When the home is built and ready for use, let her go." To this request of the Queen, the mother gave assent. So take a look at the corporal work of mercy, right? Shelter the homeless. They're asking for a place to be built for the children, right? And she does this. She actually builds a home, right? So she comes back. Remember, I was telling you the story of Queen Emma and Alexander Liho, her husband, Kamehameha IV, how they went home to home raising money for the hospital. Well, Kapiolani did something similar to build the Kapiolani home for girls whose parents had leprosy. She actually was a bit more efficient with her time, because she actually went to the wealthy people in Honolulu to ask for money. So rather than going door to door, little by little, she actually asked Claude Spreckles, who was a sugar baron. And she says, "Can you give me $2,000? And then he does. And then she goes to the royal family members. "Can you give me money as well?" Right? And so they do as well. So what we're looking at is she raised over $6,000, which is equivalent in our modern times to over $187,000. And look at the date of the opening, November 9th. 1885, November 9th, 1885. Remember her visit? Her visit was July 1884. And I always tell people that's kind of amazing to me that she was able to build a home, you know, that quickly, raise the money, get the architect, get the construction guys, build it, and open it up by November 9th. That's kind of amazing to me. And you'd never be able to do that in modern Hawaii with permitting and process and procedures. It would never happen that quickly, right? But that's what she did back in 1885. So when I do my second presentation on October 16th on Mother Mary Ann, I'll tell you a little bit more about this home. But we'll go back to the story about Kalaupapa and her visit there. So as a historian, I like primary documents, right? Primary sources. And I like drafts, because when you take a look at this draft of Liliuokalani's report, this is what the final printed report of 1886 would be based on. But some things that were in the draft didn't make it into the final printed report. And so when I take a look at what's crossed out, we can see that last line that's crossed out, it says that through slight indisposition, I did not accompany the party. So the person that's writing this is Liliuokalani. It's her report. So she did not accompany the party. And what she's talking about is she did not accompany the party to actually go to Kalawao to investigate and to see the homes there in Kalawao. So most of the people, the patients at that point in time, were actually living in Kalawao, not in Kalaupapa. So Father Damien and his church was there in Kalawao. Most of the patients were there in Kalawao. So the majority of the population lived in Kalawao in 1884, the patients. So I think I found a picture of our Queen Kapiolani on her tour of Kalawao. And so if you take a look at this particular image here, I believe this is her. Can you see my mouse there? You can see there's a woman riding side saddle, right? And I think that's her. I really do think that's her. It's because it's Victorian era. It's about the right built. You know, you see it's a woman. She's riding side saddle. Victorian era, all the women, especially of upper class like that, would be riding side saddle. And I really do think that that's a picture of her. And this, we do know it's Kalawao 1884. Dr. Arning took this picture, and we can date it, and we know because Dr. Arning is on this trip. He's an amateur photographer, right? So he takes a lot of photos. And so this is an example of corporal workers of mercy visiting the sick. She's visiting the sick. Remember, she said, I'm going to go and visit every home. And she does that. She goes into every home. And we know that she's riding on horseback, again, because of something that was crossed out. So if we take a look, it says here, with Her Majesty, what's crossed out, without dismounting from her horse, proceeded to address them. Upon this occasion, she spoke with less trepidation and firmer nerve. So it's crossed out for without dismounting from her horse. So we can say that, yes, she was riding on horseback. She did not dismount her horse when she spoke to them at that point in time. Yes. Do I have a question? I heard someone. No. Okay. So taking a look then, her visiting every home. This is what Hutchison has to say. The Queen and the superintendent entered every house. So he's talking about himself again. He always uses third person. And so it's himself. He's witnessing this. The Queen with the superintendent entered every house inhabited by lepers. The Queen greeted the occupants, aloha, as she entered. And the Queen's greeting returned in kind, aloha, with sobs. She would ask the state of their health and how they fared. The replies in general of the stricken people to the Queen's inquiry was pilikia. And so that's the Hawaiian word for hardship, suffering, problems, right? It's pilikia. And so the Queen, seeing with her own eyes the poverty, squalor, and squalid bare conditions of the homes of some of her people, was visibly affected. And her only comment heard of the scene she was witnessing was, kaumaha no ho'i, kaumaha no ho'i, sad indeed, or deep sorrow, yeah. Oh, what is the Queen's age at this time in traveling? That's a good question. So, okay, somebody's got to do the math for me. She was born in 1834, right? 1834 is when she was born. She visits in 1887. Okay, quick math here. She's 53. Is that right? Am I right? 1887 to 1884. Wait, no, I'm wrong. 1884 is when she visited. 1834 is when she was born, right? So, okay, bad math. 50 years old. She's 50 years old at the time. Yeah, Queen Kapiolani. Okay. All right, I like that. A question came up in the chat that I could answer. Okay, so she makes this visit, visits every home, kaumaha no ho'i. So this is one thing you should know about our Queen Kapiolani. Queen Kapiolani tends to wear her emotions on her sleeves. So when she is sad, you can see that she is visibly sad. So the people she's talking to know that she is visibly sad, and there's tears in her eyes probably as she's seeing what's their conditions. And then when she's happy, like when she's traveling in 1887, she, to London, she travels, and you can see that she's visibly happy, and they talk about it, and they mention how she's smiling all the time. So 50 years old, yeah. So she's this kind of amazing, our Queen, that she wears her emotions on her sleeve. So that's very different from, let's say, Princess Liliuokalani, who later becomes Queen Liliuokalani. She tends to be more stoic, and she doesn't wear her emotions on the sleeve. So a similar kind of incident happened later at the Bishop home for Queen Liliuokalani, and she's very stoic. She's not showing emotions. She's probably trying to hold it all together. But Kapiolani, she definitely wears her emotions on her sleeves. So after this visit, after she returns to Oahu, there's this correspondence that takes place between Queen Kapiolani and Father Damien. And so I was able to track down the letters. This is when I did this research, was 2008. And so the 5 letters by Kapiolani that was written to Father Damien, and the 6 letters by Damien written to Kapiolani. So the 5 letters written by Queen Kapiolani, the originals are in the Congregation of the Sacred Hearts archives in Louvain, Belgium, and they were translated into English by Thomas Manupao in 1938. And then the 6 letters by Father Damien to Queen Kapiolani, the originals were in the private collection of Teresa Malani in 1955. She showed it to the people who wrote a book about Father Damien. The Heart of Father Damien was being translated by these authors, and she showed them the letters, and then she translated one of the letters. Teresa Malani did back. She translated one of those letters. I don't know where the originals are today of the Father Damien letters that were written to Kapiolani. I've been told, I've been able to track it down by some Malani descendant, that they do exist. They haven't been, trashed or anything. They do exist. but they're still in private hands. So I don't know who has them. I'm curious to know who has them. I would love to see them. But of course, now he's a saint. It's Saint Damien. So these letters are quite valuable, I imagine. I located the French translation of these letters in the Congregation of the Sacred Heart's archives in Rome. So they gave me copies of it, of the French translations of the letters. And then I actually asked Francoise Berg, a fellow parishioner at St. Anthony's in Kailua, who has worked for and done some translation work for the Damien Museum, and she translated the letters for me. So for Father Damien's one, I had to take the. It was originally written in Hawaiian because he was fluent in Hawaiian, and then it was translated into French in the 1930s when they were trying to make him a saint the first go around, and then I took that French translation and had it translated into English, and then I was able to put the letters side by side. One after the other based on date, so that we could figure out what was happening, what are the letters about. And I have the translations of them and put them side by side and organize it as a PDF document. And I've been assured by Deacon that he's going to actually post that on the website. So afterwards, my PowerPoint, the video of my PowerPoint, as well as those letters will be posted on the website. So if you're curious, you can go read them yourselves, the translations, that is. So accompanying these letters and what the letters were all about was the fact that the people were asking the Queen for things. They needed help. And so what's happening is there's a list, and the actual list is there's actually multiple lists. So Papa Ino is just the paper names. So it's a list of names, right? A writing of the list of names. And then one list is in these legal size sort of sheets. One list is the Kane Amena Keiki, which is the men and the boys. And then the other list is the Wahine Amena Kaikumahine, and that's the women and the girls. So you got these two lists. And notice on these lists, you've got the names of the people. So these are not just numbers, right? These are names, people with names, individuals. You got their ages, and you have their ainaha now. That's their birthplace, where they were born. So the amazing part about these letters, the amazing part about these letters is that when I go and I make my this list, when I make my presentations, people, wherever I'm at, whether it's Kauai, Maui, Kaneohe, wherever, people, the first thing they do is they look to see if there's somebody from their ahupua'a, from their land division, from their island, right? And so, I've been in presenting in Kaneohe, and people, they look and they see on this first page, oh, look, Ko'olauloa, Ko'olaupoko, that's our area, right? People, when I go to Maui, they say, hey, look, Kula Maui, that's Maui. And look, Hilo is there, right? You can see Hamakua, you can see every island, every community is pretty much represented in this list. So this list, I saw it, the list, I have a copy of it that I got from, I got when I went to visit the Damien archives when it was up at Bethany here in Kaneohe. It has since moved over to St. Patrick's Monastery, right? And Stuart Ching is now the curator of it. But this list is actually in the archives. So I got a copy of it, and then I compared it to the list that was in the book at the Hawaii State Archives, and it is the same list. So what's happening then is that the two are corresponding because the Queen has been asked by the people, when she asked them, what are your problems? How can I help you? They were asking her for things. So the other list that accompanies it, the names, is a list of the names with their pilikia, or the sick people's problems, basically, ma'i pilikia. And so you have the list. And so if you take a look, I know sometimes it's hard to read the cursive. In fact, the younger generation really has a hard time with cursive. They've never really learned it in school anymore. But let me just kind of go through some of these items. Maybe you don't know Hawaiian, but what are they asking for? Lole vavai, pants. Kukamahana, warm coat. Holoku mahana, warm cloak. Mu'umu'u, dress. Palaka, work shirt. Palule mahana, warm shirt. Hulu hulu, blanket. Kama'a, shoes. Papale, hat. On and on it goes. So they're asking her, please, Queen, I need a blanket. I need some shoes. I need a hat. These are the things we need. She's listening to them. So then they had to, and we think that it was Ambrose Hutchison that came up, that was writing these lists. And because he was the assistant superintendent, he had gone with her into every home, right? So later on, he's writing it all down, and they got the two lists. And so they're corresponding and talking about the list. Father Damien has the copy, his copy. She has her copy, right? And then her women, that group of the 30 women for that society that she runs, that she is the head of, they are making the clothing, they are making the work shirts, they're sewing things, they're buying the material. This is what they're doing back home in Honolulu. So what she does, and this is the amazing thing, what she does to me, it's it's the way she wants to care for people, right, and clothe the naked. It's to do so in a very individual way. Yeah. So basically, she's packaging them with their names on it, and then Father Damien, she's sending it over, and Father Damien is distributing it. So she's clothing the naked. Okay. So I got to speed up a little bit because I noticed I'm running short of time. So she helped everyone. The names on the package, right? So as I go through those letters, some things kind of jumped out at me, which kind of fascinated me. So when looking at the last paragraph in the letter that from Father Damien to Queen Kapiolani, he writes, to avoid the grumbling of people here, please tell your workers to make individual packages, each with their names written on them, and to place them in 2 boxes, one for Kalawao and one for Kalaupapa. And I think that's fascinating because here, Damien to me seems to be a bit forward and very open about wanting to tell the Queen what she should do. Most of the people might be, I'm so sorry, Queen, but no, not Damien. He's pretty much, please, what you could do is put them in 2 different boxes. It'll really help us to distribute them. So they're talking about, practical things. He also mentions Ulu has told Dr. Finch and myself about his troubles. The doctor wants to buy a truss for Ulu's rupture. The cost of the truss is not much. Kindly advise Dr. Pike to buy it immediately and kindly pay for it. So again, he's writing to a queen, right? For his suffering is great and there is danger of his losing his life if he does not get the truss very soon. So see what Damien's doing? He's petitioning, he's asking her for help. And what does the queen do? Very quickly, the sum of $5 was given to Ulu for his support. You got it. So he's found someone to help him pretty quickly in Honolulu, right? So another correspondence, tell the head sister, Sister Marianne, to board the ship in order to select a site for the establishment of the Sisters at Kalawao. I have heard that Henry Van Giesen is opposed to the coming of the sisters and they're living here. And if he be unwilling to build their home, order me to do it. And I am used to carpentry work. And so the fascinating part about this story is that Van Giesen, Mother Marianne and the sisters had met him back in Kaka'ako Branch Hospital in Honolulu. And Mother Marianne basically gave the Board of Health an ultimatum. You have to get rid of this Henry Van Giesen guy. He is awful. He's terrible. And our sisters will run this place, right? So what does the Board of Health do? They send them over to Kalaupapa. So he builds the house that's going to be for the doctors. In fact, that's the home that Kapiolani stayed at when she went there. It was a brand new home. Anyway, so they sent him to Kalaupapa. And what does Kapiolani say to Father Damien? As for that temperamental haole, I went back to the Hawaiian, and the Hawaiian actually says hu-hu. So hu-hu in Hawaiian is angry, and temperamental is being nice. So as for the temperamental haole, it is best if he could leave the place and leave you alone. I have reported this case to the proper authorities, and probably some action will be taken in the near future. Okay, look at the date, August 11th. Van Giesen is told to leave by the fall. So he only has months left to go. He's gone. And so Kapiolani used her influence to get rid. Now, I don't know what corporal work the mercy that is, but I think that's great that Kapiolani used her influence to get rid of a guy who is not very good at helping the people, either in Kaka'ako or in Kalaupapa. Damien. So Queen Kapiolani in her last letter mentioned the fact that there are 187 men and 93 women who are entitled to the allotment of clothes. We have also made some clothes for the infirm, both men and women, to be divided equally among them. Each man will receive a shirt, a pair of trousers, and a blanket, and each woman a dress, a slip, and a blanket. As to the needs of the helpers, the kokuas, the helpers, we shall consider them later. May Almighty God help us in this great work. They're clothing the naked, right? So some of the packages had lost their labels, I guess, and so some people still hadn't received their stuff. So in the very last letter, the last shipment, she's just sending a bunch of stuff over, and she says, make sure everybody gets something. And then we also see an interesting story about Kapiolani. A short time ago, some women helpers were here in Honolulu, right? They were wearing dresses which they said were given by you. I said to myself that some lepers were deprived of their quota, and you must guard well against this practice. And Damien writes back to Kapiolani, the kokuas whom you saw in Honolulu, they maybe took for themselves the clothing destined to their relatives in the way of borrowing, as our people are usually do. Hawaiians are known for this. They just kind of borrow. Our duty is to give patients your presence in their own hands, telling them in advance that it is not your wish that they give it to others. If they do it anyway, we cannot prevent it. Do not grieve about it. So basically, think about this. The patients don't have much at all. They are asking for clothing. And if they want to share what little they have with those the kokuas who are helping them, by the way, the food rations and everything, they didn't include the kokuas. It always had to come out of the patient's rations, right? So the patients are trying to share what little they have. And so that to me just is a reflection of the patience. But he's reassuring her. She just jumps to conclusions and he's saying, no, they're sharing, but she wants to clothe them basically. And so Kapiolani, her visit actually led to improved conditions, according to Hutchinson. Queen Kapiolani's visit and survey of the leper settlement was not without result of necessary improvements thereafter. The betterment of the housing and living conditions and the laying of water pipes from Waikolu to Kalaupapa in the year 1888. So shelter the homeless, give drink to the thirsty, right? So that's the end of my storytelling, and there are sources there, and this PowerPoint will be posted. So I will stop my sharing, and then we'll go back to, should I stop my sharing? Yes. Okay. I can see you all again, and you guys can ask me questions. You can type it in the chat if you want as well. Yeah. So thank you for listening to my storytelling about Queen Kapiolani. Yeah. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Colleen. Colette. As I posted on the chat, this is the time that, first of all, what an amazing presentation. So much history. I love it. And as Colette said, all those letters from Kapiolani to Damien and back to Damien to Kapiolani, we have those letters already, thanks to Colette. And we will post all of them in our website. So give us a week or so, we will be posting a copy of the recording of today's presentation in case you missed any part of it. We will also have a copy of all the slides that Colette presented to us, and those letters too, so that you will be able to go back and read those letters. So we will have that all in our DMCCHawaii.org website. For now, does anybody have any comments or any questions for Colette? We have a few minutes to do that. So we ask you to submit your questions or comments through our chat box. Here we got one, Colette, from Jenny.
Yes, I can hear. Yeah.
Okay. Can you see the question?
I can see the question, so let me read the question. So for the recording purposes, what was the Queen's faith? She trusted Father Damien, I suppose, from her actions to his requests. So the Queen's faith, she was an Anglican. And so actually when the first group of Christian missionaries came, they were Protestant missionaries, right, in 1820. And they were the ones who established Kauai Church in Honolulu, not too far from Iolani Palace. But by the time we get to the 1860s, those Protestant American missionaries don't have as much influence because Queen Emma and Kamehameha IV have invited the Anglicans to come. And so that was in 1860. So Queen Emma was very much influenced by the British. Alexander Liho, the king, had traveled and he really liked the British system as well. And so they invited the Anglican Church. So it really is the Anglican Church. I don't know, I didn't have my other slide. They called it they used the word Catholic in the name of that particular, of when they wrote it down, the Reformed Catholic Church or something like that, but it was the Anglican Church. Truly, it was. The bishop was ordained in London, and he had been sent over by the British. So she was an Anglican. So was Emma and Alexander IV, right? So Kalakau as well. So Protestant in general, just like evangelical kind of Protestant or Congregationalist Protestant, maybe it was with the Kauai Church folks. But then by the time she got married, she was definitely Anglican. So you know how it works even with us with baptism? So we will recognize baptism in any of the other religions. So we'd recognize an Anglican baptism, right? So the Anglicans recognized the Protestant baptism that she already had, and then they confirmed her in the Anglican Church right before they got married. So her and Kalakaua were confirmed in the Anglican Church. If I'm wrong, Stuart Ching could probably answer this for me because he was my contact with that some of the paperwork there. So I've seen the documents at St. Andrew's Priory where they actually have they got married, right? And I believe and confirmed as well. So the royals were being confirmed. Liliuokalani as well. She was also confirmed in the Anglican Church because in part because those missionaries, those ABCFM, American Board of Commissions for Foreign Missions that left in Boston back in 1819 and arrived here in 1820, those descendants of those missionaries by 1860s, those descendants of the missionaries by the 1890s are the ones who helped to overthrow our queen, right? It's the descendants of those missionaries. So there's this, we already can see by the 1860s that they no longer have as much influence. And so we start seeing other religions coming in, like the Catholics and the Anglicans and others. Yeah.
I had a question for you. You know, and I'm sure you're going to talk to us more in October when we talk about Sister Marianne and the relationship with the Queen. But we know through history that Sister Marianne was very careful on keeping care of her own sister to be sure that they would not get sick in terms of how they take care of the patients and all the proper precautions. Now here we got the Queen going into people's homes, you know, and looking at today's situation with the pandemic and all the hand sanitizers and everything we need to do, and masks and everything. Through history and through the documents that you have read, did you find anything that says how the Queen took care of herself when she was visiting?
No, I didn't come across anything about how she cared for herself. You know, I think it comes down to perspective at this point in time. The Board of Health was made up of these white men, right, with Western style doctoring education. So they were worried and scared, and they were the ones who were encouraging the Hawaiian government to isolate these people. But on the other end, the Hawaiians themselves, just like the Queen and her first husband, had already, their natural inclination is to just care for your sick family members. We do the same thing in this pandemic, right? Your natural inclination is to just care for them. So we might have to isolate ourselves, but we just care for them. She never mentioned any kind of cleaning or washing or anything. She didn't have that training, I don't think. She just wanted to meet people. So it's kind of like, I think of it in terms of our family members today, when people are caring for them, you kind of put your own self at risk, I guess, but she wasn't thinking that way. And a lot of Hawaiians, when I look at letters, one of my projects I had my students do back in 2008, 2009, was to actually go and pull the letters that the patients were writing to the Board of Health and to see what they were asking for. And many, many letters was actually the patients asking for family members to be sent as kokuas. So those kokuas we're talking about, those helpers, are really people who are often the spouse or a parent, and they have chosen to go to Kalaupapa to care for their loved ones, right? So the Hawaiians in general, I think, are not as afraid of this disease the way the white man is, right? Or the Western trained doctors are. And so there's this great compassion. And I think that is what she's not afraid. She's just not afraid. And I think it's because she's seen it before and she helped care for him before. And she didn't get it from back when he had it, right? In the 50s, when her brother-in-law had it. So I don't have anything that says that she was, taking any precautions. I just have that she visited, and she intended to visit, and she did. She actually went and visited. She wanted to see for herself the conditions, so she could report back.
But we have
other questions.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions for you. Did the Queen have any interactions with Robert Louis Stevenson?
I don't know. I know we have pictures, and we know that her husband, David Kalakaua, did. And so my guess is that it's some kind of party, some kind of event that they must have had when they invited Robert Louis Stevenson over to Iolani Palace. My guess is that she was probably at that some of those dinner parties, right, or invites. So yeah, I would think she did, but I don't have anything written that says that she did. I have to do more research on that, but I'm guessing she probably did.
Patricia is asking, did the government pay for the donated clothes, or was the Queen still fundraising for such things?
It's fundraising by the Queen and her group. Yes. So the government was not very good at providing the necessities of what the people needed. They had an allowance of clothing, but it was obviously inadequate. And so that's what the people were complaining about. It wasn't enough, right? And so they had their regular allotment from the government, but that wasn't changing. Instead, she actually raised the money and did this. So maybe down the line, they might have increased it, but I haven't found the exact connections to say that happened yet. But yeah, she continued to raise money. That's what she was known for, fundraising. Yeah.
Yeah, Patty Danko is thanking you for the presentation and for all that you have learned. I also thank you also. I think this is the same feeling for everybody. We have learned so much through this presentation on how Queen and her dedication to her people is amazing. Also, Joseph Yoshida wants to thank you, and nice to see how the church example and the state coming together can help people. And that's something that I'm sure we should learn today more about it too. I'm trying to see if there's any other questions. Deacon, could you send us Colette's email address?
Yeah.
and we will work on
Oh,
that.
can I put it in the chat? I don't care if people
Yes,
email
yes,
me. Yeah, it's
yeah, you
actually,
can go ahead.
yeah, okay.
So
This is my
again, Colette, you can, yeah, there you go. Everybody now has Colette's email address.
my email.
So if you wanted to email her and ask her for anything else after this presentation, I would actually would like to take the last few minutes for kind of let everybody know what's coming up. And basically, we have Colette again, as I mentioned before.
You got me again.
Colette is going to come back in October 16 with what we call part 2 of the Hawaiian Monarchs. And now she will be speaking about the relationship with Sister Marianne Coe. So we're really looking forward for that presentation and to hear that perspective. I was really, really touched. And you know, when I saw this on our rehearsal run, I was telling Colette, wow, how Damien was so bold to go forward and tell the queen, you know, hey, I want this done. And you
and she does it. And she does it.
And she answered back. She answered back.
Yeah,
so
funny.
Knowing how Marianne was and the personality of Marianne, I look forward to hear from Colette the stories between the queen and Saint Marianne. So that will be on October. So keep an eye on our emails, on our website for more information. And then in our last webinar for this year, which is going to be on December 11, will be about Joseph Dutton. And as we all know, Joseph was a Vermont native. That he also lived in Kalapapa, and he helped Damien and Marianne, especially after Damien died. He stayed there and continued Damien's mission. And as we all know, the Diocese of Honolulu just started the process of working towards getting, hopefully, Joseph Dutton into sainthood. So we need to continue praying for him and praying for his cause. So stay tuned also for more updates and announcements for 2022. You know, this 2021 webinars has been so successful, and everybody has been so supportive that the Damien Marianne Catholic Conference decided that we are going to continue offering these webinars throughout 2022. And we are already working on the schedule, on the presenters, the theme. So I don't want to say much about it yet, but you will love it. I'm sure you will like it. Again, what's coming next? And here is another announcement of October 16, same time, 10 to 11:30 Hawaii time. And again, it will be free. You can check in through our website. And as always, you hear me say this over and over again, we are blessed for all the support that you always provide to our Damien Marianne Catholic Conference organization, and we continue to ask for your support. So if you can, and you can consider a donation of $10 or more, please, you can help us continue with our mission to do this webinar and the webinars that we had in the plans for 2022. So please visit our website where you can click the donate button and donate. And again, in advance, thank you for all your support. Here are some of the names of people that have been helping us in the past months. We continue to thank you and thank also all our future donors. Another ways that you can help us, if you want to continue helping us, email us. You can email us our volunteer, dmcc@gmail.com, or you can visit us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. We are on all social media so that you can offer us your support. We're always looking for people to help us on different aspects, and especially promoting. Right now, that's the most important part for us, to promote these webinars and to continue to promote our saints around the whole world, not only in Hawaii. So I wanted to one more time on behalf of the Damien Marianne Catholic Conference to thank Colette for this wonderful presentation, for the time that she had put together to put this for us, and in advance to thank her again for the next one in October. So Colette, God bless you. Thank you for all that you are doing. Thank you for all this amazing history presentation that you got us today and connect us with our Hawaiian history and the royals. And we thought that what best to do today to end our prayers and our time together with Colette, guiding us through the prayer of the Our Father in the Hawaiian language. So Colette.
Right. So I learned the Our Father prayer back in 9th grade from my Hawaiiana teacher. And I had it memorized back then, but not right now. But so I'm gonna read it. But I and I love it because this is the language of Kapiolani. This is the language. Father Damien learned this language too, right? And so he would have prayed the Our Father in Hawaiian as well. So, e pulikako, e koma kua I loko kalani, e ho'ana ia ko inoa, e hiki mai ko aupuni, e malama ia ko make maka honua nei. E liki me ia I malama ia ma kalani la. E ha'awe mai ia mako I ke ia la, I aina mako no ne ia la. E kala mai ho'i ia mako, I ka mako lawe hala ana. Me mako e kala nei I ka po'e e lawe hala I ka mako. Mai ho'oku'u o ia mako I ka ho'o vale ia mai. E ho'o pākele no na ia mako I ka ino. No ka mea, no ke aupuni, a me ka mana, a me ka ho'onani ia a maoloa aku. Amen.
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 The Father,
Thank you.
the Son, the Holy Spirit. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day. God bless. And we look forward to see you in October 16th.
Yes, you get to learn all about Kapiolani and Mother Marianne. Yes.
God bless you.
Okay.
Bye.
God bless. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Colette. Wonderful.
Thank you.